Hello and welcome to the Cardinal News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. We're a nonprofit independent newsroom serving Southwest and Southside Virginia at cardinalnews.org. I'm Lisa Rowan, filling in for Dutchy Jesse. The Cardinal podcast is sponsored by Garland Properties, leasing apartments and commercial spaces in Roanoke, Martinsville, and Pulaski, Virginia. Garland Properties, building healthy communities. Today, we're joined by Matt Busse, a Cardinal reporter covering business issues across our coverage area. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for almost interrupting a moment ago.
No one knew except for the two of us, and now everyone. We are doing one of those mashup episodes today where we aren't looking at a single article that you've written, but rather a big topic on the minds of Virginians. It's a topic that has a million roads that we could take it down to, so that creates a challenge for us to keep it concise, but we are going to try. We are talking energy. Electricity demand is rising in Virginia and across the nation, and there are a lot of opinions about how best to meet that demand. So, Matt, set the scene for us. How much is the demand for electricity really rising, and why now?
Sure. So, for about maybe 20 years or so, up until around 2020-ish, electricity demand across the U.S. was basically flat. If there was population growth or economic growth, typically that would be offset by improvements in energy efficiency. There was some decline in electricity-intensive manufacturing, that sort of thing. Today, in the past few years, we've really seen a surge in demand, especially in Virginia. And there are a number of forecasts that predict significant increasing electricity demand in the years to come. One of the biggest reasons is the increase in data centers and very computing intensive applications, particularly artificial intelligence. Northern Virginia is the largest data center market in the world, and the data center market is spreading outside of Nova. There's development in Richmond. We have a few data centers in Southwest and Southside Virginia, and there are signs that there are more on the horizon. This electricity usage is considered commercial or industrial because it comes from these businesses where really all of us are contributing to the demand. If you buy something on Amazon, if you search for something on Google, if you use a smartphone, even watching or listening to this podcast right now, a data center is involved in the storage and processing of our video and audio. There was a report last year that predicted that if the data center growth in Virginia continues unconstrained, that was the word that the report used, unconstrained, that electricity usage in Virginia could almost triple by the year 2040. A lot of people are doing a lot of planning and policy right now based around these forecasts. Two of the big questions we're looking at are, where is all this power going to come from? And who pays for the infrastructure that we need, especially when so much of this growth is driven by data centers.
And it seems from your reporting and work across Cardinal News that all the options have big fans and big opponents for how we're going to meet this demand. We've got natural gas, nuclear, wind, solar, and coal is still a player here, which a lot of people might not think about, but coal is still on the table. So tell me about the methods that are being considered to meet increasing energy demand and sort of the pros and cons that are out there about each of them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a variety of available sources that could be developed. All of them have their supporters and their opponents. Kind of in the mix with all this is the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which was a major state law passed in 2020 that calls for Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power, which are the state's two largest electric utilities, to have carbon-free energy portfolios by 2045 for Dominion and 2050 for Appalachian Power. The law calls for more solar, more wind, more battery storage, which, like the name suggests, is a component. It's often paired with renewables so that when, for example, your solar panels are producing tons of energy, they can get stored in these batteries and then released at times when the renewables are not producing. At the same time, there's concerns that the renewable energy development in Virginia is, not happening quickly enough to meet the demand, especially now that data centers and other factors, electric vehicles, electrification of manufacturing, things like that, are really driving this increase in demand. So, solar, it's renewable, it's zero carbon, but we've seen a lot of local opposition to large solar projects. One gets proposed and a lot of neighbors, community members come out. They don't want that in their area. Some local governments, counties have enacted some rules restricting the development of solar. Offshore wind, Dominion Energy is developing a very large offshore wind project off the coast of Virginia. The environment at the federal level right now, I think it's safe to say, is not as friendly to offshore wind as it may have been. The Trump administration has halted some offshore wind projects, saying that they're inefficient. Natural gas, we've had some recent expansions of natural gas in general in Virginia with the completion last year of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which carries a large amount of gas from West Virginia into Virginia. The big gas pipeline system in Virginia is the Transco system. There are two projects proposed to expand that, both of which would involve Pennsylvania County, which of course is in the Cardinal coverage area. Nuclear power is perhaps seeing a bit of resurgence. There's been a lot of talk about advanced nuclear technology, particularly small modular reactors. Like the name suggests, these would be smaller than traditional nuclear reactors. But none have been commercially deployed. A lot of them are still being designed. They would still need to be licensed. I think some of even the more conservative estimates put those at being maybe 10 years away from coming online and being connected to the grid. You mentioned coal. Of course, coal is still in the picture. Coal employment, coal production has been declining in recent years, but much of Appalachian Power's energy still comes from coal. So all these sources have their supporters and their opponents. And, there's no universal agreement on what path forward we should pursue. Some people say we should go all renewables. Some people say, well, that's not realistic. We're going to need more, what they say is more reliable energy sources, like natural gas and nuclear. So a lot of discussion, a lot of debate in the business community, in the political community. Again, just no universal agreement on what the best path forward is.
When I'm sitting as a consumer, both of news and electricity, and I'm seeing all of these debates about what's the best way to meet this demand and what does it mean statewide, like I think about my electric bill at home and I think about my costs and are they going to increase? And I wonder if this is something that you hear about from your readers. Do they write in saying, my electric bill is high, I don't know what to do. What is the deal with this?
Yeah, absolutely. That is probably the thing that I hear about from readers the most.
Really?
Tied, I would say tied with solar power in general. People have a lot of thoughts about solar power, solar projects, both for and against. Some of that may be self-fulfilling because I write a lot about electric bills. I write a lot about solar power. So that's what people are going to write in about. But yes, so for those readers who are wondering, well, what's going on with my bill, I can give two updates. For those of our readers in Dominion Energy territory, right now there is a rate case going on before state regulators. So Dominion and APCO are regulated utilities, which means if they want to increase their rates, they have to ask the state for permission. And they go through a regulatory process where the public can weigh in, other interested stakeholders can weigh in, and ultimately the regulators get to decide how much they're allowed to adjust their rates. So Dominion has a case ongoing right now that if they get what they have requested, it would raise the average residential bill by about $21 as of the beginning of 2027.
$21 a month?
Yes, that's correct. $21 a month. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Some of that is fuel costs that would be passed through directly to the consumer, and some of that is for, infrastructure costs, poles, wires, things like that. And then some of it just relates to how much money they want to be able to deliver to their investors, the return they want to deliver to their investors. They are also involved in, going back to data centers, they're also involved. There's a debate going on right now about whether these data centers should pay more. They should pay more for electricity. They should pick up more of the cost of the infrastructure because, you have these data centers. And let me pause here and say, really, this applies to any big commercial or industrial user of electricity. I'm not trying to pick on the data centers. They are the big growing market. They are what is said to be responsible for a lot of this growth. But really, this would apply to large users of electricity. So the thinking is, well, if they're the ones that are driving this increase in electricity consumption, should they be picking up more at the tab? If you have more entities using more electricity, you've got to get that power from somewhere. You've got Dominion's proposing to build a new natural gas plant in Chesterfield County, for example. So there is an argument that data centers should pay more for this power generation, for the transmission costs, literally upgrading the grid to get the power from point A to point B where it needs to be. There's a decision expected in these Dominion cases, I believe, by the end of this year. Meanwhile, Appalachian Power, which I think the majority of Cardinal readers are Appalachian Power customers, they are expected in March to submit their next rate case. They do it every 2 years. The last one they submitted in March 2024. They asked for an increase that would have raised the average residential customer's bill by about $10 a month. The state allowed them about 10% of that, so it was about $1 and change per month that your bill went up if you're an average APCO customer. And then this coming March 2026, they are expected to submit their next rate review case. I can't say at this point what they will be asking for or how their request might potentially impact rates. We'll just have to see when it comes up in March.
Well, I think everyone's going to be keeping an eye on their bills and hopefully keeping an eye on Cardinal News, because I know you'll be covering this pretty extensively over the next couple of months as that takes place. So click on all the articles, people. Let's talk for a minute. We've talked about the consumer side of this, but talk about, beyond our own homes, the business side of this. Do we have businesses that are sort of responding to this demand by hiring and ramping up their operations to meet this demand?
Yeah, and a number of these businesses are in the Cardinal News coverage area. So as you have these forecasts of electricity demand and this development of data centers, this anticipated development, this anticipated need to produce more parts, more components for the electrical grid, there are manufacturers in our area that are responding to it. And by my calculations, looking at just sort of the big jobs announcements that have come out in our area, and I'm talking about the big ones where, typically the governor shows up, there's a lot of photos taken, there's probably a press release, there's a lot of fanfare. So sort of setting aside any kind of quiet, gradual growth that companies may be experiencing that goes under the radar. Large announcements recently include Hitachi Energy, which has a large operation South Boston, just announced it's going to expand that operation even further. They make large power transformers for the electric grid. They are planning to add 825 jobs. Just earlier this year, they announced a 120 job expansion at a different location. Delta Star in Lynchburg, which also makes power transformers and substations for the electric grid, announced 300 new jobs. A company in Botetourt called Munters, which makes climate control systems for data centers. So data centers, lots of computers, lots of heat generated, got to keep them cool. They're going to add 270 jobs. Looking back at some others, Modine adding 211 jobs in Rockbridge. They make data center cooling equipment. Solarix is a company that makes solar panels. They're a startup. They're in Bedford County. They're planning 104 jobs. So that goes back to the power generation. Where's the power going to come from? So all in all, past 2 years, by my calculation, just looking at the big announcements, approximately 2,500 new jobs have been announced in Southwest and Southside Virginia related to data centers, power generation, electric grid components and upgrades, sort of that sector that's all being driven by this increased demand for electricity.
One question that I'll throw in here is you and I have done some reporting together about the training that it takes to do solar installation. And what I came to understand through that reporting process was that if you want to install solar panels, you basically train to be an electrician and then you add some skills, around the edges of that to be able to specialize. When we're talking about these companies that are planning to hire large amounts of people, are these skilled jobs or entry-level labor jobs, or is it some combination? Do you know about that?
Yeah, so I think it's typically a combination. I mean, you've got some engineering jobs, which are, you design the components, either for manufacturer or perhaps, for a specific project. That's going to require, some electrical engineering, some mechanical engineering skills. You do have the more traditional manufacturing jobs, assembly jobs, operations, actually putting together the components. Of course, there's a whole logistics and shipping arm to it, getting the things from the factory to the place they need to go. And then, of course, there's the administrative jobs that go with it. These companies, you have to have, the HR folks and the back office folks, accounting, finance, anything else that comes along in general with the business getting larger, you're going to need to have. So, these are generally what you would call manufacturing sector jobs, but within that, like you said, it's a mix of roles.
Yeah. And those payroll jobs are important. Everyone needs to get their paycheck every other
Yes,
week.
I appreciate ours for sure.
Yeah. Let's look ahead a little bit. So we're heading into the fall and election season. Here at Cardinal, basically every day is thinking about the campaigns. We have an extensive voter guide that we talk about all the time. So, the election is on our mind for governor and seats in the General Assembly. But for the consumer, it is energy demand and fulfilling that demand. Is that something that is top of mind for candidates for governor or House of Delegates or the Senate?
Yeah, so I think where you're really going to see, and let me just pause for a moment and say I am not good at political predictions, but I'm going to do my best.
So you're not Dwayne Yancey, is what you're saying?
No, absolutely not.
Our oracle.
Absolutely not, and nor will I ever be Dwayne. But I think I'm pretty confident in the things I'm about to say. And if anybody disagrees, my email address is matt at cardinalnews.org. So we have an election coming up. Yeah. We do have an election coming up in November. Voters will get to elect a governor, a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, all 100 members of the House of Delegates. Our other legislative body, the state Senate, is up for election in 2027, I believe. So I think where you're going to see the focus and where this election could influence things in terms of energy is the Virginia Clean Economy Act that we talked about later, which is the state's roadmap for pushing towards more renewables and phasing out fossil fuels. There's been a lot of pushback, and I'm going to kind of paint with a broad brush here, so forgive me. There's been a lot of pushback, largely from Republican lawmakers and candidates who argue that the Clean Economy Act is, it's misguided, that the renewables can't meet the demand, that we do in fact need other types of production, natural gas, nuclear, etc. At the same time, we have seen legislation in recent years, primarily from Democratic lawmakers, who are looking to get, more renewables, more solar. There was some legislation last year and the year before. It didn't pass either time, but it would have given the state more input, or as some saw it, more control over where large solar power projects get located within counties. I think you're going to see a lot of that come up, and the November elections could influence it. Right now, the House of Delegates is almost evenly divided, thin Democrat majority. The Senate has a thin Democrat majority. I believe it's 21-19. House of Delegates currently is 51-48, I believe, because there's one vacancy. So So, let's kind of real briefly look at what could happen. Let's say you have you're going to continue, at least for the next couple of years, having the Democratic majority Senate. Let's say you've got that. Let's say Democrats keep the majority in the House and you have a Democratic governor. I think you can expect lots of pro-renewables legislation to pass through. We'll see. There has been some small Democratic dissent on some solar bills, particularly Democrats who represent rural districts where there's some stronger opposition to large-scale solar. But we'll see. If you have a Democratic governor, I think at the very least you would have fewer vetoes of energy bills that the Democrats push through. In the last session, we did see some bills come through that Governor Youngkin then vetoed. Overriding a veto takes more votes than simply passing a bill. If you get a Republican governor, even if Democrats keep their majority in the House and then they have the majority in the Senate, I think it's likely you would see some vetoes of those bills like we did in the last session. And then if you have a Republican governor, a Republican majority House of Delegates, and then again, still this Democratic majority Senate, you're going to need a lot of compromise to get anything through one way or the other. If you have a Republican lieutenant governor, the lieutenant governor is the tiebreaker vote in the Senate. So you've got a 21-19 Democratic majority Senate. Let's say you've got one Democrat who let's say you've got a vote that is breaking down along party lines, but you've got one Democrat or who dissents, who breaks ranks. Again, we saw some of this last session. The lieutenant governor is the tiebreaker, and whether that lieutenant governor is a Republican or Democrat could obviously make a big difference on some of these issues that really break down on partisan lines. I think if you see that last scenario, the Republican governor, the Republican House, the Democratic Senate, again, I'm bad at predictions, but my prediction would be you'd either see things that involve a lot of compromise, or you just wouldn't see a whole lot of game-changing energy legislation either way. I fully expect to be proven wrong on whatever scenario ends up being true, but that's kind of my view of the landscape at the moment.
Well, whatever happens, there is going to be a lot to watch. And as we were talking about those rate change requests from the utilities, so, no matter what happens, and even outside of what happens in Richmond, there's going to be a lot to keep an eye on, and you will be doing that. So thank you so much. Remind our listeners, if they want to get in touch with you, your email address.
Yeah, you can reach me at Matt, M-A-T-T, at cardinalnews.org. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. Well, you heard it here. If you want to complain about your energy bill, you can get in touch with Matt. Matt, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Cardinal News of Virginia. Thanks to our sponsor, Garland Properties, and also to Sean Eddy of Eddy Alexander for production support, and also to Cardinal News' own Zach Shelton. Read all of our paywall-free local news coverage at cardinalnews.org. I'm Lisa Rowan. Thanks so much.